Hello all. Today we will discuss chapter 8, the later Vedic phase, transition to state and social formation. Expansion in the later Vedic period, circa 1000 to 600 BC. The history of the later Vedic period is based mainly on the Vedic texts, which were compiled after the age of Rigveda. The collections of the Vedic hymens or mantras were known as Samhitas. The collection of Vedic hymens or mantras were known as the Samhitas. The Rigveda Samhita is the oldest Vedic text on the basis of which we have described the early Vedic age. For purposes of singing, the prayers of the Rigveda were set to tune, and this modified collection was known as Samaveda Samhita. Okay, for the purpose of singing, the prayers of Rigveda were set to tune, and this modified collection was known as Samaveda Samhita. In addition to Samaveda, in post Rigvedic times, two other collections were composed. These were Yajurveda Samhita and Atharva Veda Samhita. The Yajurveda Samhita contains not only hymens but also rituals which have to be accompany their recitation. The rituals reflect the social and political milieu in which they arose. The Atharva Veda contains charms and spells to ward off evils and diseases. Its content throws light on the beliefs and practices of the non-Aryans. The Vedic Samhitas were followed by the composition of a series of texts known as Brahmanas. These are full of ritualistic formula and explain the social and religious aspects of rituals. All these later Vedic texts were compiled in the Upper Gangetic Basin in circa 1000 to 600 BC. In same period and in same area, digging and exploration have brought to light nearly 500 sites inhabited for the first time. These are called painted grey ware (PGW) sites. Okay, figure 8.1 shows the painted grey ware. Okay. These are called painted grey ware (PGW) sites because they were inhabited by people who used earthen bowls and dishes made of painted grey pottery. They also used iron weapons. With the combined evidence from the later Vedic text and PGW iron phase archaeology, we can form an idea of the life of the people in the first half of the first millennium BC in Western Europe, in Western Uttar Pradesh and adjoining areas of Punjab, Haryana, and Rajasthan. The texts show that the Aryans expanded from Punjab over the whole of Western Uttar Pradesh, covered by the Ganga Yamuna Doab. The Bharadas and the Purus, the two major tribes, combined and thus formed the Kuru people. In the beginnings, they lived between the Saraswati and Drishadwadi. Saraswati and Drishadwadi, just on the fringe of Doab. Soon the Kurus occupied Delhi and the upper portion of the Doab, the area called Kurukshetra, or the land of the Kurus. Gradually, they coalesced with a people called the Panjalas, who occupied the middle portion of the Doab. The authority of the Kuru Panjala people spread over Delhi and the upper and middle parts of the Doab. They set up their capital at Hastinapur, situated in the district of Meerut. The history of the Kuru tribe is important for the Battle of Bharata, which is the main theme of the great epic called Mahabharata. This war is supposed to have been fought around 950 BC between the Kauravas and Pandavas, although both of them belong to the Kuru clan. As a result, practically the whole of the Kuru clan was wiped out. Excavations at Hastinapur, datable to the period 900 BC to 500 BC, have revealed settlements and faint beginnings of town life, but they do not at all answer the description of the Hastinapur in the Mahabharata, because the epic was finally compiled much later in about the 4th century AD, when material life had advanced much. In later Vedic times, people hardly knew the use of burned bricks. The mud structures that have been discovered at Hastinapur could not be imposing and lasting. From traditions, we learn that Hastinapur was flooded and the remnants of the Kuru clan moved to Kaushambi near Allahabad, the Panjala kingdom, which covered the modern districts of Bareilly, Badaun, and Farrukhabad is famous for its philosopher kings and Brahmana theologians. Towards the end of the later Vedic period, around 600 BC, the Vedic people spread from the Doab further the east to Kosala in eastern Uttar Pradesh and Videha in the north Bihar. Although Kosala is associated with the story of Rama, he is not mentioned in the Vedic literature. In eastern Uttar Pradesh and North Bihar, the Vedic people had to contend against people who used copper implements and black and red earthen pots. In western Uttar Pradesh, they possibly came up against the people who used pots of ochre or red color and copper implements. They had been living there from about 1800 BC. They possibly also encountered thin inhabitations of some people using black and red ware. It is suggested that at a few places they came against the users of the late Harappan culture, but these people seem to represent a conglomerate culture which cannot be characterized as purely Harappan. Whoever be the opponents of the later Vedic people, evidently they did not occupy any large and compact area, and their number in the upper Gangetic basin does not seem to have been large. The Vedic people succeeded in the second phase of their expansion because they used iron weapons and horse-drawn chariots. The PGW, iron face culture, and later Vedic economy. From around 1000 BC, iron was used in the Gandhara area in Pakistan. Iron implements buried with dead bodies have been discovered in good numbers. They have also found in Balochistan. Okay, about the same time, the use of iron appeared in eastern Punjab, western Uttar Pradesh, and Rajasthan. Excavations show that iron weapons such as arrowheads and spearheads came to be commonly used in the western Uttar Pradesh from about 800 BC. With iron weapons, the Vedic people may have defeated the few adversaries that may have faced them in the upper portion of the Doab. The iron axe may have been used to clear the forests in the upper Gangetic basin, although because of rainfall ranging between 35 centimeter to 65 centimeter, these forests may not have been so thick. Towards the end of the Vedic period, knowledge of iron spread in the eastern Uttar Pradesh and Videha. Iron implements have been discovered in this area from the 7th century BC, and the metal itself is called Sharma or Krishna Ayas in the later Vedic. Okay, iron implements is known as Sharma or Krishna Ayas in the later Vedic texts. Okay, here you can see the distribution of painted grey ware. Then here the figure 8.2 shows the iron objects from PGW layers at Atranjikera. Okay. Although very few agricultural tools made of iron have been found, there is no doubt that agriculture was the chief means of livelihood of the later Vedic people. Later Vedic texts speak of 6, 8, 12, and even 24 oxen yoked to the plow. This may be an exaggeration. Plowing was done with the help of wooden plowshare, which would possibly work in the light of soil of the upper Gangetic basin. Enough bullocks could not be available because of cattle slaughter in sacrifices. Therefore, agriculture was primitive, but there is no doubt about its wide prevalence. The Shatapada Brahmana speaks at length about the plowing rituals. According to ancient legends, Janaga, the king of Videha and father of Sita, lent his land to the plow. In those days, even kings and princes did not hesitate to take to manual labor. Balarama, the brother of Krishna, is called Haladara or wielder of the plow. Haladara is also called as wielder of the plow. In later times, plowing came to be prohibited for the members of the upper varnas. In later times, plowing came to be prohibited for the members of the upper varnas. The Vedic people continued to produce barley. Okay, but during the During this period, rice and wheat became their chief crops. In subsequent times, wheat became staple food for the people in Punjab and western Uttar Pradesh. For the first time, Vedic people came to be acquainted with the rice in the Doab. It is called Vrihi in the Vedic texts, and its remains recovered from the Hastinapur belong to the 8th century BC. Vrihi is known as rice is known as Vrihi. Okay. The use of rice is recommended in rituals, but that of wheat only rarely. Various kinds of lentils were also produced by the later Vedic people. The later Vedic period saw the rise of diverse arts and crafts. We hear of smiths and smelters who had certainly to do something with iron working from about 1000 BC. Numerous copper tools of the pre-1000 BC uh, period found in the western Uttar Pradesh and Bihar might suggest the existence of coppersmiths in both Vedic and non-Vedic societies. The Vedic people may have used the copper mines of Khetri in Rajasthan. In any case, copper was one of the first metals to be used by the Vedic people. Copper objects have been found in painted greyware sites. They used they were used mainly for war and hunting, and also for ornaments. Weaving was confined to women, but was practiced on a wide scale. Leather work, pottery, and carpenters' work made great progress. The later Vedic people were acquainted with four types of pottery. Okay, which are they? Black and red ware, black slipped ware, painted gray ware, and red ware. Black and red ware, black slipped ware, painted gray ware, and red ware. The last type of pottery, which is red ware, was most popular with them and has been found almost all over the western Uttar Pradesh. However, the most distinctive pottery of the period is known as the painted gray ware. It consisted of bowls and dishes, which were used either for rituals or for eating or for both. But by the upper orders, glass hoards and bangles found in the PGW layers may have been used as prestige objects by a few persons. On the whole, both Vedic texts and excavations indicate the cultivation of specialized crafts. Jewel workers are also mentioned in later Vedic texts, and they possibly catered to the needs of the richer sections of society. Agriculture and various crafts enabled the later Vedic people to lead a settled life. Excavations and explorations give us some idea about the settlement in later Vedic times. Widespread painted grey ware sites are found not only in western Uttar Pradesh and Delhi, which was the Kuru Panjala area, but also in the adjoining parts of Punjab and Haryana, which was the Madra area, and in those of Rajasthan, which was the Malchya area. Altogether, we can count nearly 500 sites, mostly belonging to the upper Gangetic basin. Only a few sites, such as the Hastinapur, Atranjikera, and Noh, have been excavated. Since the thickness of the material remains of habitation ranges from 1 meter to the 3 meters, it seems that these settlements lasted from 1 to 3 centuries. Mostly, these were entirely new settlements without having any immediate predecessors. People lived in mud brick houses or in wattle and daub houses erected on wooden poles. Although the structures are poor, oven and cereals, rice recovered from the sites show that the painted grey people, who seem to be the same as the later Vedic people, were agricultural and led a settled life. But since they cultivated with the wooden plowshare, the peasants could not produce enough for feeding those who were engaged in other occupations. Hence, peasants could not contribute much to the rise of towns. Although the term Nagara is used in later Vedic texts, we can trace only the faint beginnings of towns towards the end of the later Vedic period. Hastinapur and Kaushambi near Allahabad can be regarded as primitive towns belonging to the end of the Vedic period. They may be called proto-urban sites. The Vedic texts also refer to the seas and sea voyages. This suggests some kind of commerce which may have been stimulated by the rise of new arts and crafts. On the whole, the later Vedic phase registered a great advance in the material life of the people. The pastoral and semi-nomadic forms of living were relegated to the background. Agriculture became the primary source of the livelihood, and life became settled and sedentary. Supplemented by diverse arts and crafts, the Vedic people now settled down permanently in the upper Gangetic plains. The peasants living in the plains produced enough to maintain themselves, and they could also spare a marginal part of their produce for the support of princes and priests. Political organization. In later Vedic times, the popular assemblies lost in importance, and the royal power increased at their cost. The Vidada completely disappeared. The Sabha and Samiti continued to hold the ground, but their character changed. They came to be dominated by princes and rich nobles. Women were no longer permitted to sit on the Sabha, and it was now dominated by nobles and Brahmanas. The formation of wider kingdoms made the king more powerful. Tribal authority tended to become territorial. Princes ruled over tribes, but their dominant tribes became identical with territories, which might be inhabited by tribes other than their own. In the beginning, each area was named after the tribe which settled there first, but eventually the tribal name became current as the territorial name. At first, Panjala was the name of a people, and then it became the name of a region. The term was Rashtra, which indicates territory, first appears in this period, which is in later Vedic period. Okay. The king's influence was strengthened by rituals. He performed Rajasuya sacrifice, which was supposed to confer supreme power on him. He performed Ashwamedha, which meant unquestioned control over an area in which royal horse ran uninterrupted. He also performed Vajapeya, or chariot race, in which the royal chariot was made to win the race against his kinsmen. All these rituals impressed the people with the increasing power and prestige of the king. During this period, collection of taxes and tributes seem to have been become common. Okay, they were probably deposited with an officer called Sangrihitri. The epics tells us at that time of big sacrifices, large-scale distributions were made by the princes, and all sections of people were fed sumptuously. In the discharge of his duties, the king was assisted by the priest, the commander, the queen chief, and few other high functionaries. At the lower level of the administration, the administration was possibly carried by village assemblies, which may have been controlled by chiefs of the dominant tribes. These assemblies were also entrusted with the trial of local cases. Okay. But even in later Vedic times, the king did not possess a standing army. Okay. But even in the later times, the king did not possess a standing army. Tribal units were mustered in times of war. And according to one ritual, for success in war, the king had to eat along with his people from the same plate. Okay. Social organization. Social organization. The later Vedic period, later Vedic society came to be divided into four varnas called Brahmanas, Rajanyas or Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras. The growing cult of sacrifices enormously added to the power of the Brahmanas. In the beginning, the Brahmanas were only one of the 16 classes of priests, but they gradually overshadowed the other priestly groups and emerged as the most important class. They conducted rituals and sacrifices for their clients and for themselves, and also officiated at the festivals associated with agricultural operations. They prayed for the success of their patron in war, and in return, the king pledged not to do any harm to them. Sometimes the Brahmanas came into conflict with the Rajanyas, who represented the order of the warrior nobles for positions of supremacy. But when the two upper orders had to deal with the lower orders, they made up their differences. From the end of the later Vedic period, it began to be emphasized that two should cooperate to rule over the rest of the society. The Vaishyas constituted the common people, and they were assigned the producing functions such as agriculture, cattle breeding, etc. Some of them also worked as artisans. Towards the end of the Vedic period, they began to engage in trade. The Vaishyas appears to be only tribute payers in the later Vedic times, and Kshatriyas are represented as living on the tributes collected by the Vaishya, collected from the Vaishyas. The process of subjugating the mass of tribesmen to the position of tribute payers was long and protracted. We have several rituals prescribed for making the refractory people, Vis or Vaishya, submissive to the prince, Rajanya. All the three higher varnas shared from one common feature. They were entitled to the Upanayana or investure with the sacred thread according to Vedic mantras. The fourth varna was deprived of the sacred thread ceremony, and with this began the imposition of disabilities on the Shudras. The prince, who represented the Rajanya order, tried to assert his power over all the three other varnas. According to Aitreya Brahmana, in relation to the prince, the Brahmana is described as a seeker of livelihood and an acceptor of gifts, but removable at will. A Vaishya is called tribute paying, meant for being beaten and to be oppressed at will. The worst position is reserved for the Shudra. He is called the servant of another, to be made to work at will by another and to be beaten at will. But generally, the later Vedic texts draw a line of demarcation between the three higher orders on the one hand and the Shudras on the other. There were nevertheless several public rituals connected with the coronation of the king, in which the Shudras participated, presumably as members of the original tribe. Certain sections of artisans, such as Rathakara or chariot maker, enjoyed a high status and were entitled to the sacred thread ceremony. Therefore, even in the later times, Varna distinctions had not advanced very far. In the family, we notice the increasing power of the father, who could even disinherit his son. Okay. In princely families, the right of primogeniture was getting stronger. Getting stronger. Male ancestors came to be worshipped. Women were generally given a lower position, although some women theologians took part in philosophical discussions, and some queens participated in the coronation rituals. Ordinarily, women were thought to be inferior and subordinate to men. The institution of Gotra appeared in the later Vedic times. Okay. Literally, it means the cow pen or the place where cattle belonging to the whole clan are kept. But in course of time, it signified a descent from a common ancestor. People began to practice Gotra exogamy. No marriage could take place between persons belonging to the same Gotra or having the same ancestor. Ashramas or four stages of life were not well established in Vedic times. In the post Vedic texts, we hear of four ashramas, that of Brahmachari or student, Grihastha or householder, Vanaprastha or partial retirement, and Samyasa or complete retirement from the world. But only three are mentioned in the later Vedic texts. The last or the fourth stage, which is Samyasa or the complete retirement from the world, had not been well established in the later Vedic times. Gods, rituals, and philosophy. In the later Vedic period, the upper Doab developed to be the cradle of Aryan culture under Brahminical influence. The whole of the Vedic text literature seems to have been compiled in this area in the land of Kuru Panchalas. The cult of sacrifice was cornerstone of this culture and was accompanied by numerous rituals and formulae. The two outstanding Rigvedic gods, Indra and Agni, lost their former importance. On the other hand, Prajapati, the creator, came to occupy the supreme position in the later Vedic pantheon. Some of the other minor gods of the Rigvedic period also came to be forefront. Okay, Rudra, the god of animals, became important in the later Vedic times, and Vishnu came to be conceived as the preserver and protector of the people, who now led a settled life instead of a semi-nomadic life, as they did in Rigvedic times. In addition, some symbolic objects began to be worshipped, and we notice signs of idolatry in the later Vedic times. As society became divided into social classes such as the Brahmanas, Rajanyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, some of the social orders came to have their own deities. Pushan, who was supposed to look after cattle, came to be regarded as god of the Shudras. Although the age in the although in the age of Rigveda, cattle rearing was primary occupation of the Aryans. Okay, people worshipped gods for the same material reasons in this period as they did in earlier times. However, the mode of worship changed considerably. Prayers continued to be recited, but they ceased to be the dominant mode of placating the gods. Sacrifices became far more important, and they assumed both public and domestic character. Public sacrifices involved the king and the whole of the community, which was still in many cases identical with the tribe. Private sacrifices were performed by individuals in their houses because in this period the Vedic people led a settled life and maintained well-established households. Individuals offered oblations to the Agni, and each one of these took the form of a ritual or sacrifice. Sacrifices involving the killing of animals on a large scale, and especially the destruction of cattle wealth. The guest was known as the Gogna, or one who was fed on cattle. Brahmanas were only one of the 16 types of priests. The priests who officiated at sacrifices were rewarded generously and given dakshinas or gifts. Okay, sacrifices were accompanied by formulae which had to be carefully pronounced by the sacrificer. The sacrificer was known as the Yajamana. The sacrificer was known as the Yajamana, the performer of Yajna, and much of his success depended on the magical power of words uttered in the sacrifices. Some rituals performed by the Vedic Aryans are common to the Indo-European peoples, but many rituals seem to have developed on this Indian soil. These formulae and sacrifices were invented, adopted, and elaborated by the priests called the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas claimed a monopoly of priestly knowledge and expertise. They invented a large number of rituals, some of which were adopted from the non-Aryans. The reason for the invention and elaboration of the rituals is not clear, so mercenary motives cannot be ruled out. We hear that as many as 240,000 cows were given as dakshina or gift to the officiating priest in the Rajasuya sacrifice. In addition to the cows, which were usually given as sacrificial gifts, gold, cloth, and horses were also given. Sometimes the priests claimed portions of the territory as dakshina, but the grant of land as sacrificial fee is not well established in the later Vedic period. The Shatapada Brahmana states that in the Ashwamedha, north, south, east, and west, all should be given to the priest. If this really happened, then what would remain to the king? This, therefore, merely indicates the desire of the priests to grab as much land as possible. But really, considerable transfer of land to priests could not have taken place. There is a reference where land which was being given to the priest refused to be transferred to them. Towards the end of the Vedic period, we notice a strong reaction against priestly domination, against cults and rituals, especially in the land of the Panchalas and Videha, where around 600 BC the Upanishads were compiled. These philosophical texts criticized the rituals and laid stress on the value of right, belief, and knowledge. They emphasized that the knowledge of the self or Atma should be acquired, and the relation of Atma with Brahma should be properly understood. Brahma emerged as a supreme god, comparable to the power kings powerful kings of the period. Some of the Kshatriya princes in the Panchala and Videha also cultivated this type of thinking and created the atmosphere for the reform of the priest-dominated religion. Their teachings also promoted the cause of stability and integration. Emphasis on the changelessness, indestructibility, and immortality of Atma or soul served the cause of stability, which was needed for the rising state power. Stress on the relation of Atma with Brahma served the cause of loyalty to superior authority. The later Vedic period saw certain important changes. We find the beginnings of territorial kingdoms. Wars were fought not only for the possession of cattle but also for that of the territory. The famous Mahabharata battle fought between Kauravas and the Pandavas is attributed to this period. The predominantly pastoral society of early Vedic times became agricultural. The tribal pastoralists came to be transformed into peasants who could maintain their chief with frequent tributes. Chiefs grew at the expense of tribal peasantry and handsomely rewarded the priests who supported their patrons against the common people called the Vaishyas. The Shudras were still a small serving order. The tribal society broke up into a Varna divided society, but Varna distinctions could not be carried too far. In spite of the support of the Brahmanas, the Rajanyas or Kshatriyas could not establish a state system. A state cannot be set up without a regular system of taxes, professional and a professional army, which again depends on taxes. But the existing mode of agriculture did not leave scope for taxes and tributes in sufficient measure. Okay, we have completed chapter 8. In the next video, we will discuss chapter 9, Jainism and Buddhism, which is one of the most important topic in both prelims and mains. Okay, thank you for listening me. We'll see you in next class. Thank you very much.